when it comes to Olympics for for Olympic events, basically. But the Nigerian women have made us proud. 60% of our representatives at the Olympics were female, and at Worthy, this is seen as a cultural shift. And so we'll be continuing our conversation. How do we go from just the Olympics to focusing on women's economic empowerment and also women's health? And our guest today has two first class degrees, a first class degree in law, another in education. It's my pleasure to introduce the executive director of Invictus Africa, Bukky Shonibare. Good morning, Bukky.
Good morning, Andy.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Bukky, because you are constantly achieving more and more and more. But most importantly, one of the bits which you still do is fight for the rights of the downtrodden, to fight for people's rights generally, and even empowering people. So, what does women's economic empowerment mean to you, and how does this play in when we talk about nation building?
Thank you very much. To define women's economic empowerment, I think it's important for us to first set some form of context. Nigeria has over 49.3% of its population as women. Yet, we have over 70% of the 19 million people who live in abject poverty in Nigeria are women. And then when we look at also the fact that a lot of women in Nigeria, don't have access to capital, they don't have access to productive assets, they don't have access to economic opportunities. I mean, just compare that to the large population of women we have in Nigeria. And then when we dig down, we see that the World Bank has also released data to show that 70% of the country's extreme poor, 70% of them are actually women, despite the fact that we have a lot of women in Nigeria. In terms of financial inclusion, we also see how women are completely left out of that. 56% of Nigerian men have access to financial services. Unfortunately, we have only 45% of women who have access to financial services. Only 10% of women have access to land ownership, despite the fact that we have the 1978 Land Use Act. And when we compare that to the fact that when you look at the entire agricultural supply chain, or the entire spectrum, 70 to 80% of those who contribute to that process and those who contribute to the output are also women. So coming back to that question, and let's not forget the impact of education in relation to women's economic empowerment and women's health, and the fact that we have, over 53% of young girls who are unable to finish school. If you come to digital access, we also have data showing that over 34% of women do not have access to the digital space. So coming to the question that you asked, what is economic empowerment? I laid that background, particularly the data, so that we better understand why we even talk about economic empowerment for women. And so economic empowerment is a process. That's why it is economic empowerment. By empowerment, it is simply saying that it's an ongoing process. It's not women economic empowered. So it's not like an end in itself, but it's a process where women have that ability to be able to, control their income, to be able to gain, income, to also be able to make strategic decisions based on how economically empowered that they are. Now, why is that important? Data has shown that for every woman that is economically empowered, it impacts on the nutrition of the child, it impacts on the nutrition of the family, it impacts on the nutrition of the society. So you see the correlation between women's health and women's economic empowerment. We've also seen cases where how empowered a woman is also impact on the opportunity they have to be able to, seek economic opportunities. It's a healthy woman that can be a wealthy woman. When a woman is healthy, the woman can go to work, the woman can run businesses on her own, and being able to do that means that there is that strong correlation as well. Let's also not forget that when we talk about women's economic empowerment, we're also looking at the impact of that on the GDP. World Bank released data recently to say that when women participate in the workplace, it increases the country's GDP by 23%. In figures, that means it increases the country's GDP by $229 billion. So you see that when women's health is prioritized, when women are healthy, they're able to seek economic opportunities, and when they're able to seek opportunities, it impacts not just on their family, it impacts on them, it impacts on the society, and it impacts on the nation as a whole. And we must not forget also the fact that when women are economically empowered, and I will close my thought on that, in saying that other than the multiplier effect, we have more women in decision making when that happens. Currently in Nigeria, at the Senate, we have only 4 women out of 109 senators. That is, a 3.7% representation. When you go to the House of Representatives, there are only 16 women out of 360 House of Reps members. That is a 4.4% representation. When you go to the State Houses of Assembly, we have only a 5% women's representation, 50 out of 993 members. And so you see that when women's health is prioritized, it links to their economic empowerment, and they are able to participate in the entire spectrum of the society, including decision making. And when women are in decision making, we are able to see more gender inclusive policies. We are able to see perspectives that impact on not just women, but also children, persons living with disabilities, persons from ethnic minorities. So that's what, women's economic empowerment is a process, and then it has a lot of effect, not just on the woman, but on the nation as a whole. Andy.
Bukky, I like how you made the connection between if women are healthy, then it also leads to economic empowerment. And I 100% do agree with you. It's also sad that 98% of Nigerian women are left out of formal credit schemes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're all aware that most of us were able to have Christmas clothes, we're
Mm.
able to go to school
Mm.
because our mothers were part of some agile type of groups where every month they had a contribution, and that came in during the rainy days, not even just for the children, but for their husbands. And this is a conversation which we don't have a lot of. The society tends to benefit from it more. And I'm glad you said that. But let's look at it from a policy angle. I recall a year ago there was the proposal to create a special seat for women in the Senate and in the House of Reps. And it was shocking to see some people kick against it, including some young representatives. What policy direction do you think we need to have for enshrining women's economic empowerment within?
So I've heard all you've said and these statistics you brought, and I'm in support of that as a woman, particularly when it comes to the area of politics, which I'm really interested in. But what can we do to ensure these investments actually happen, and how can we ensure this conversation continues and change is actually impacted?
Good question. And I think that also ties to what Andy was trying to
Yeah.
say, if I get the question before the connection went bad, is in terms of policy. And I want to hinge that on policy. The
Okay.
question that you asked, I want to hinge it on policy. Currently, Nigeria has the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy and Action Plan. It was signed just in 2023.
Yeah.
And it has this, five-pronged spectrum in terms of how we can make sure that women are economically empowered. Women in agriculture, women in entrepreneurship, women in emerging industries, women's education, and those five different parts. And when we tie that to policy, we want to see first policy that advances girl-child education. Education becomes that very basic minimum. One of the advocacies that I have been leading is to ask that we should make sure that we have policy that guarantees free education for our young children up to senior secondary. Section 18 of the Constitution already guarantees or gives the right to education. But when you look at where it is placed in the chapter 2 of our constitution. So it doesn't give that, it is a toothless portion of our constitution. It means that is an imperative of the government. The government can choose to do it or not choose to do it. But when it is a chapter 4 right, which is, a civil and political right, it makes it easier for the government to be able to push for it. So if we can empower our girls educationally, it gives them the opportunity to be able to advance even economically, politically. So I think that is first one major aspect. Another major aspect is in terms of strengthening the implementation mechanisms that we have. Now, we have a lot of laws, we have a lot of policies, even the constitution, like I mentioned. But we've always had problem with the implementation of these laws and policies. If you read the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy and Action Plan, it is robust. But we will be making the mistake of not empowering women. I said earlier how empowering women economically means that it will translate to our GDP. But if that policy is not implemented the way it is supposed to be implemented, we are going to be missing out not just even the naira and kobo value of economically empowering women. There is also connection between women's economic empowerment and women's health, women's economic empowerment, and even how children in households are educated. Data have shown, especially from UNICEF, that the more the woman in the house is economically empowered and educated, it will translate to the lives of the children in the family. But let's also look at other policy areas around budgetary allocation. Every government have their own priorities, their own programs, their own initiatives. If we don't have adequate budgetary allocation to these initiatives, it's just going to be another thing that is written. Now, we have the Women's Economic Empowerment Policy. If we don't have budget lines, specific budget lines in our National Chart of Account, it's just going to be another document. We see in relation to education, for instance, we currently have a 5.53% allocation to education by the federal government of Nigeria. If you go to other states, not many states meet the 15 to 20%, UNESCO standard that has been set. So I think another policy area is our budget. Our budget are laws. And so just being able to make sure that we have enough money to be able to do the work of economically empowering women and making sure that women are also able to have good health also helps. But one thing that I must stress also is how social norms impact on women's health and how that connects to women's economic empowerment. If women's health is not prioritized, if women still have to seek permission from a third party, from a male figure, you go to a lot of communities in Nigeria. A woman cannot make decision on her health care. She cannot make decision on whether she wants 3 children or 2 children. The husband will say, this is what you have to do. So we have those social norms that also still impact. So that means that we need to strengthen our policy. Unfortunately, we have many policies and laws in this regard. The Violence Against Persons Prohibitions Act of 2015, and which has been adopted by many states, states this thing as well. And so that's one area that we must also look at. And I think that we should also look at policies around partnership with the private sector. A lot of companies in Nigeria have corporate social responsibility. And so can we work with them, not just government agencies, but even civil society organizations and individuals, making sure that those companies are able to have their own corporate social responsibility in such a way that empower women. But beyond that is the importance of making sure that workplaces have sexual harassment policies, anti-sexual harassment policies in place, because even if women have access to workplace, if the workplace is not conducive for them, they face sexual harassment, they will not gain the kind of women's economic empowerment that we are talking about. And a lot of times when women are sexually abused, psychologically abused, mentally abused, it impacts on their health. And so you see how women will not go to work simply because they don't want to face one boss or one colleague who is going to sexually harass them. And so you see see that connection as well. So those are some of the things that I believe that we can do. Andy said something, that 98% of women don't have access to credit. Yet data have shown that women usually pay their loans on time. And you know why that is interesting? I was one of the consultants on the You Win initiative under the Goodluck Jonathan administration. So there was this Youth with Innovation. So it's called You Win. And that project was such that they give up to 10 million naira to small business owners to advance their businesses. And for a lot of the businesses that I monitored, that I consulted for under that initiative, most of them, the ones that are owned by women, were performing better. A lot of the women were using their money better. The men were just, in fact, in one of the states, the man went to use the money to marry another wife. And so we've seen that when you commit money into women's hands, they use it to empower themselves, empower their families, empower the society, and empower the nation as a whole. So those are my points on that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, actually. And my next question was going to be how this women empowerment, translates into economic growth, which you just answered already. But let's talk briefly on women's health. What are some key challenges that women face when it comes to accessing healthcare here in Nigeria? Because you mentioned how, it also connects to women empowerment. Can you speak on that
Good
briefly?
question. Let me start with primary healthcare.
All right.
So there's primary, there's secondary healthcare, and then there's tertiary healthcare. But in relation to primary healthcare, which is usually like the basic, you find out that once we're able to get primary healthcare right, the other layers of healthcare may not require that much of effort or attention, because a lot of preventive, healthcare has been provided at the primary healthcare. I mean, primary healthcare level. If you have malaria, for instance, like it was being discussed earlier on the show, you go to a primary healthcare center. But what are some of these challenges? Is first the access. So I'm a human rights law graduate, right? And part of the things that we learned was the 3AQ model to healthcare. The 3AQ framework simply talks about the fact that healthcare must be accessible, must be available, must be affordable, must be acceptable, and must have quality. Let's talk about the accessibility of healthcare as one of the challenges. Even though Nigeria has a lot of primary healthcare centers, most of them are not within close proximity to where people can access. And you can think of that in terms of how it will affect a woman. A woman who is pregnant, for instance, cannot walk a long distance. So we want to make sure that our primary healthcare centers or our healthcare centers are actually available, accessible, geographically accessible to women. But also in terms of the availability of healthcare, we want to be sure that for every primary healthcare center, they are providing holistic healthcare services to the women. So it's not just that I would only come here and be able to get treatment for malaria or headache. If I come with issues around my breast, for instance, are there qualified healthcare practitioners there who can assess it and be able to say, okay, this is most likely what is happening to you? How about affordability of healthcare? Even though it's primary healthcare, you find out that a lot of times people cannot afford it. Like, so I'm currently not feeling too well. And I was in Gombe. I came back from Gombe just yesterday. And because I wasn't feeling too well, I asked them to go and buy medications for me. By the time they calculated how much I'll buy the anti-malaria and the antibiotics, it was 21,450 naira. And as I was sending that money, I was asking myself, how many women are in communities that they cannot, access this kind of healthcare? I recently went through a myomectomy, which is the surgical removal of fibroids. I did that sometime in March, right? It's my second time of doing a myomectomy. And the second time I was doing it, when I looked at how much I had to pay, there are many women who are struggling with fibroids today who don't even know that is what they are dealing with. And even when they get to know that's what they are dealing with, they cannot afford, the surgical removal. And right now, that's like the only solution that there is to fibroids. So the affordability of healthcare is also important. And finally, is quality. the quality of healthcare. Can people go to primary healthcare centers and you know that that place is furnished with well-trained, personnel in those places, people who are well trained to be able to provide those kind of services. But beyond that, in relation to quality, is also the importance of having basic equipment. I went to one hospital here, and the stuff they brought to measure my blood pressure was faulty. By the time the thing came out with my blood pressure, my blood pressure went up just by looking at the wrong diagnosis the thing had actually given me. So we want, even though they are primary healthcare, they are often in communities. That they are in communities does not mean that they should not have, quality
Quality.
standards as well. And lastly, is the challenge of social norms. I alluded to it earlier.
Yeah.
There are women who cannot on their own go to the hospitals. Why? Because they need to seek the permission of their male guardian or male head in the family. And so you go to some of these communities, you want to talk to them about, family planning, about contraceptives. The man will want to sit there and insist that he has to be there to determine whatever the woman is saying. Women go through a lot of things that they can only trust a healthcare practitioner to share. And when all of these challenges are in place, it makes you wonder whether indeed we are setting up our women in such a way that they can access the healthcare that is available to them. So I've talked about accessibility, acceptability,
Quality.
affordability, and even the quality
Yeah.
of healthcare. And each of these, while these frameworks are there, they have inherent challenges that if we don't deal with them, women will not be able to access the healthcare. And if they cannot access the healthcare, they will not be healthy enough to be able to seek economic empowerment. A healthy woman is a wealthy woman.
Absolutely. Beautiful. And you?
Thank you very much, Buki. Thank you so much for your contributions. I would like to introduce someone who I'll now call a friend, Jemima Osunde. She is an actor or an actress. She is a physiotherapist, which I find extremely interesting. But she's also an advocate for women's economic empowerment and women's health. Good morning, Jemima. I would have to ask you to turn your screen around. I think we're facing different directions, but yes. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Do you still want my landscape or?
Yes, please. I think
Oh,
you need to flip it.
let's switch. So this is better.
No. Now I've got you facing the other direction.
I have three options. This is the
Perfect.
third
This
one.
is fine.
Yeah,
Yes, this is fine. Thanks for joining us, Jemima. And as you know, we are running our Empower Her Game campaign in collaboration with Worthy.
yeah.
And because of what you do, and which I find really commendable, what does women economic empowerment mean to you, especially as a woman in the healthcare space?
First, I want to say good morning to everyone, especially to Miss Bukky Shonibare. Everything that you have said, I don't know if you can see me, but while you were speaking, I was just nodding my head like, yes, yes, she's speaking fact, truth. Women empowerment to me is everything because before I'm anything else, I'm a human being, but I'm a woman. And women empowerment is extremely significant to me because I'm not just a woman, I'm a woman who wants to do things, a woman who is doing things. And I'm only able to do these things because of certain levels that I've gone to as a human being in my society. There's so many things that she said that I would not want to repeat, but I will emphasize on. It is extremely important to make sure that the women in our societies are empowered. It's extremely important to make sure that they're well equipped with the things that they need. Because, like she said, if you empower a woman in a household, you are indirectly empowering the entire household. Now, this is not just us saying it because it's convenient. These are tested and proven facts. In a home where, for example, the mother is educated, you find that it's easier for the children to be educated and pick up on these things. You cannot expect a woman to be productive if you are not equipping her with everything that is needed to achieve that. A woman is a powerhouse. A woman is a vessel for bringing life. It is impossible to understate the essence of women in society, in the homes, and as such, I believe that it's only right and it's only logical that you establish women as such important beings and part of our societies, that you make sure that they're empowered to achieve the things that you need them to achieve in these settings. Women empowerment to me is my lifeline. Without women empowerment, I'm just another person existing that will not reach or even tap into the potential that I've been given from creation. Women empowerment is extremely important to me.
Jemima, I like how you put it when you say women empowerment is your lifeline, and that's just outstanding. But let's talk about investing, because a huge barrier to women economic empowerment and even mental health is the financial implication and the lack of investment in that space. But as Nigerians, when we think about investment, we only always look at government, but we do have a thriving private sector and informal sector.
Yeah.
What do you think the role of the private sector in investing in women's economic empowerment should be, considering the fact that, especially in entertainment, in movies, in music, we get a lot of support for those sectors, especially when it comes to lifestyle, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't see as much when it comes to empowering women or women's
Women.
health. So this is your cue to speak to the private sector on what we are talking about.
Well, hi, private sector. Jemima here. I would say that this is one. Let's even look at it from a productivity angle. Nobody wants to put in any kind of investment that's not going to yield, whether financial, whether emotional, mental, physical, whatever. If you're investing anything in something, you want returns. You want to see your investment yield some sort of returns. Now, this is me telling you that women are one of the most productive entity that you could invest in. With you get almost immediate results. Um, there's nothing that is 100% fail proof, but one thing that has shown a significant level of productivity is women in fields and spaces that we haven't, expected to see them in. Women are, we excel and we work under pressure, which is extremely. I always try to run away from the tag strong woman. But one thing we've seen is that in situations where it looks like there's no way out or there's no solution, women will find a way. Um, I would say people have not paid attention to investing in women because they maybe have not exactly seen that it is an area that exists to invest in. I guess people they just invest in fields, certain things, let's say lifestyle, invest in filmmaking, invest in music. They'd rather do that because that's what has been established and that's what has been mostly done. And so that's where they have, would I say, results to compare with and see possibility of further, results. But I'm now saying that women is we're a sector, if that's what we want to call it now, that would yield attention or whatever to us. We're a sector, women infiltrating spaces that we've never been before. I've been on film sets where we have women in departments we've never seen them before, and they are excelling. We have women behind the cameras now. We have women in departments for lighting and grip. We have women in sound. And even sometimes I find myself surprised, like, whoa, why are you here? Because you expect a woman to be in makeup, or you expect her to be in the department for wardrobe or welfare, but you now see women that are handling things that are predominantly men, and they're doing so well. And I won't lie, even personally, sometimes it's somewhat a culture shock. But that's because we've not pushed and encouraged these things, not because women cannot do them. It's just because we haven't thought of a world where women are doing these things. But now we're getting there and we're seeing more women in these things. And it's exciting for me, absolutely, especially because of how well they do. Now, if you're in a situation, I don't know about you, but personally, if I'm in a situation where I typically would not be, where most people my gender have not been. When I get there, I don't want to fail. I don't want to mess it up. I want to prove a point. And I think this is a driving force for a lot of women in a lot of these male dominated spaces. When you're dealing with people who are coming with their 100 game, who want to prove a fact, people who want to show that I should be here, people who intend to solidify their reasons for doing what they want to do, I think you already have people who are motivated enough to want to do better. And that in itself should be, reassuring enough for you to see that whatever you invest in it will bring returns. So, yes, private sectors, please don't wait for the government. We can't keep waiting for the government for everything, especially something as important as this. We want to be able to communicate to our daughters and the next generation that you can do it. You're more than like you have everything it takes, and we will support you. That support is everything. It is so important. It is the final push that will get women to do these things that I believe we definitely can do as women.
Jemima, there's always so much to take away when you speak. And talking about your sector, it just made me remember the likes of Kemi Adetiba, Funke
Exactly.
Akindele,
Yeah.
Abudu, Mildred.
Yeah.
Like some of the best movies we've seen in the last 10 years out of
Women.
Nigeria were either directed or produced by women.
Women.
So
Mm-hmm.
once women have that equal platform, because I think it's unfair when we call it a chance. It's almost as
Mm.
if we are saying, "Here, I'm giving this to you." All they
Yeah.
need is just this equal platform to thrive, and Nigerian women, have shown us that they succeed in those spaces. But before I let you go, you have always ventured into male-dominated spaces, from the movies to even the healthcare space. What do you have to say to younger girls who find this challenging, like studying what you studied in school, you're back to school to study, even though you do have a successful acting career? What do you have to say to encourage younger women to take the stand, to take that next step, regardless of the barriers?
Okay. For me, it's like, you know how sugar rush is when you're starved of something and then you eventually have it and you just have an inflow, like an excess of it. With me, I always just feel like I want to always do the next thing that people think is impossible, because anyone who looks at me now and hears I'm doing a master's in public health is like, why? And my own answer is, why not? I can do it. As long as I can do it, I'm gonna at least attempt it. I want every young girl who watches me or hears of my life or what I'm doing to know that there are no limitations except the ones that you create. But I also want her to be able to say that and it be fact. I want the only limitations that any girl has to deal with to be the ones that she sets for herself. I don't want the limitation to be because the country has set it, or because the society has set it, or because legally this is only as far as she can go. I don't want that for the girl child. I want her to be able to see that this is the entire world. I can go anywhere I want. I can do anything I want. I just have to dictate it and determine it. When I was in the College of Medicine, I had people who said it was impossible to, simultaneously have a career in entertainment. It doesn't make sense. It's not possible. Well, I did it, because I was allowed to, because I was in a society and I was from a home. In fact, it all starts from the home. The home is the first place. My biggest support in doing this thing that looks impossible to everyone else were my parents. Now, if I didn't have that support from home, if I didn't have two adults who love me more than anyone in the world and push me to be better every day, tell me that if this is what you want, we will support you to the best of our abilities. I will not be here. You wouldn't know that the Jemima existed. I would probably just be Jemima, head of certain physiotherapy department in a clinic somewhere that only the people in that immediate community would have access to. The primary place any woman would get support is her family. So the family unit is an extremely crucial part of building the girl child and building her mindset. So I want to say a big thank you to my mom and dad because they pushed me, they supported me, and they gave me all the, you know, backing I needed to venture into this. And if that backing can be replicated from the family unit, which is the primary unit, to the secondary and tertiary levels, then it just makes it somewhat easier, where that final push is just a personal decision. And as long as we are able to provide that setting, the final push should not be that hard for any girl to make, or any child to make. I mean, look at the Olympics, for example. Right now, I think we have 87 delegates from Nigeria. Imagine my pleasant surprise to see that about 62 of these are women, are young girls, all under the age of, I would say, 35 to 36. It is exciting for me. I love to see things like that. These are things I take note of in history to read to my daughters when I have them. Do you know that in 2024, 62 of the 87 people that represented our country were women? So if that's something you want to do, it's been done. You can do it. Do you know that you can go to the College of Medicine, be a medical student, and still have a career in filmmaking? Oh, that's not possible. Well, it is. Jemima Osunde did it. I want things like that. I want more stories. I want more things we can amplify. I want more, you know, situations that show that these things are possible. Because it's only when people say the experience is the best teacher, but I think observation is also a really good teacher. When you're able to observe that it's been done, and this thing that looks like such a mountain is no longer such a mountain, that somewhat encourages you. It makes you feel better, like, okay, maybe I can. And that's just what I want my life to be for all the girls who are growing up and watching me. I want you to be able to look at me and say that because I've done it, it means that it's possible. And just maybe you'll make the decision to do something that is important and passionate to you as well.
Jemima Sunday, that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Bukky Barrel, always a pleasure speaking to you. You've said it all, to be honest. I want to say special thanks to Worthy for partnering with us and bringing the Empower Heart Game series to Nigerians. And this is just to shed more light on the importance of women's economic empowerment and women's health and the need to invest in those spaces. If you like something, if it's thriving, invest in it and let it grow. That's much we can take on this segment. We'll take a quick break. When we return, more on the Louise's show.